Hey there, folks. I'm not much for telling stories, never had the knack for it, but what I saw last summer has been eating at me, and I gotta share it with someone. This ain't your usual campfire tale, and I ain't no writer, so bear with me. It was one of those hot July nights when the air's so thick you could slice it. I'd been driving down Elkhorn Road, which skirts the Monongahela National Forest, a place I've driven by 1,000 times but never thought much of. That night, though, it was different. Something was off. I first noticed it when I saw that the wildlife was silent. No crickets chirping, no frogs croaking, nothing. Just silence and the dull roar of my old truck's engine. Then I saw people, just standing off the side of the road, real still like statues. They didn't move, didn't blink, just stared straight ahead. I slowed down, thinking maybe they needed help or something, but the closer I got, the clearer it became that something was horribly wrong. I'm not one for superstitions or anything. I grew up around these parts, hunting in the woods, fishing the streams. Never saw anything I couldn't explain. Until that night. It was past midnight, and I was coming back from a buddy's place. I had a few, but I wasn't seeing things. You gotta believe me. As I was driving, I got this prickly feeling on the back of my neck, like I was being watched. I shrugged it off, turned up the radio, and kept driving. That's when I saw them, people lined up like mannequins by the side of the road. Men, women, even a couple of kids. All standing still as the grave, eyes wide open, staring at nothing. I stopped the truck, heart thumping in my chest. "Y'all okay?" I called out, my voice sounding thin in the quiet. No answer. I stepped out, the door creaking loudly, and walked up to the nearest, a woman with a sundress and a blank expression. She didn't blink, didn't flinch when I waved my hand in front of her face. I ain't ashamed to say I was scared. I backed away, and that's when I heard it, a rustling in the trees. Something was there, something big. I couldn't see it, but I could feel its eyes on me. I ran back to my truck, hopped in, and sped off. In my rearview mirror, I saw them, still standing there, and beyond them, a shadow moved. When I got home, I locked the doors and sat up with my gun across my lap until morning. I told myself I'd go back in the daylight, just to be sure I wasn't crazy. But when I went back, there was nothing. No people, no shadows. Just the road and the trees and the silence. That morning, after a night of no sleep, I felt like a fool. There had to be an explanation. Maybe it was some local kids pulling a prank, or I was more buzzed than I thought. So I decided to go back to Elkhorn Road in daylight, just to put my mind at ease. The sun was high and birds were chirping when I got there, everything looked normal. Too normal. I parked the truck near where I saw those people. I walked around, searching for any sign of what I saw last night. Nothing. No footprints, no broken branches, no dropped items. It's as if the earth swallowed them whole. I knocked on a few doors of the houses nearby. Most folks didn't answer. The few that did, they looked at me like I was crazy. People standing in the road? At night? "You sure you ain't hitting the bottle too hard, Mike?" one old-timer asked with a chuckle. I left feeling even more frustrated. I couldn't shake the image of those people from my mind, especially the kids. Why would kids be out that late? It didn't add up. On my way back home, I drove past Elkhorn Road again. I saw something that made my blood run cold, a child's teddy bear, lying in the ditch by the road. It was wet, like it had been there all night. I grabbed the bear and spun around, half expecting to see those people again. But there was nothing. Just the long, empty road and the whispering trees. I threw the bear into my truck and drove home faster than I should have. Questions circled in my head like vultures. Who were they? What were they looking at? And why couldn't I find a single clue about what happened to them? I tried to get on with normal life, but the image of that bear in the ditch wouldn't let me be. So, I did something that might have been dumb. I went to the local library. I figured, maybe there was some history about Elkhorn Road that I didn't know about. The librarian, Mrs. Callahan, gave me a funny look when I asked about any strange happenings around Elkhorn Road. "You mean the legends?" she whispered, like even talking about it was taboo. She pulled out an old, dusty book about local folklore and flipped to a dog-eared page. It was a story about a group of settlers who vanished without a trace, right around Elkhorn Road. The story was old, from the 1800s, but the chill it sent down my spine was fresh. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the night. That's when it happened, silence. Just like that night. No crickets, no wind, nothing. It was like the world was holding its breath. I grabbed my flashlight and gun, my heart beating a mile a minute. I didn't want to go outside, but I had to know. The beam of my flashlight cut through the darkness as I made my way toward the road. Then, a scream. A blood-curdling scream that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. I ran toward it, my feet pounding on the hard dirt. As I reached Elkhorn Road, the scream stopped abruptly, and I was left panting in the silence. The road was empty. No figures, no shadows. But there was something. A piece of cloth, caught on a branch, fluttering in the breeze that had just picked up. It looked like a piece from a sundress, the same kind a woman in my vision had worn. I stumbled back home, the scream still echoing in my ears. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't think straight. I was being pulled into something I didn't understand, something that felt older and darker than anything I'd ever known. Days passed, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The scream had been real. The cloth had been real. But the police wouldn't believe me. "You found a piece of cloth? And you heard a scream?" "Out in the woods," the deputy had said, trying not to laugh. "We'll look into it," but his eyes said different. I had to do something, so I went back to Elkhorn Road every day, trying to find any other clues. I felt like a fool, but I couldn't stop. Then, one evening as the sun dipped low, I saw something, a gathering of people in the distance, on the road. My heart leapt into my throat. I approached slowly, my hand on the knife I'd started carrying. As I got closer, I saw they were looking at something on the ground, circled around like vultures. I called out, "Hey! What are y'all doing?" They turned as one, and I froze. It was them, the people I'd seen that night. Their eyes were hollow, faces pale and drawn. They didn't speak. They just turned back to what they were looking at. I edged closer, my guts churning. In the middle of the circle was a deer, but it was wrong. Its body was twisted in a way that no living thing should twist. And around it, the ground was scorched like a fire had burned there, but there was no ash, no smell of smoke. One of them, an old man with eyes like dark holes, finally spoke, "It's a sign." His voice was a dry whisper. I wanted to run, to get away from those dead eyes and that twisted deer, but I couldn't move. "A sign of what?" I managed to choke out. "Change," was all he said. As I backed away, the sky rumbled, and a sudden wind whipped up, scattering leaves and dirt. I ran, not stopping until I was back in my truck, panting and shaking. When I looked back, the road was empty. The people, the deer, all gone. But the storm was just beginning. The storm broke that night with a fury I hadn't seen in years. Lightning forked the sky, and thunder shook the windows. I couldn't sleep. Every shadow seemed to move, every gust of wind sounded like whispers. I was trapped in my own home, jumping at every creak and groan it made. When dawn finally came, I was a mess. I hadn't touched my gun, but it was still by my side, a cold comfort. I knew I had to go back to Elkhorn Road one last time. I had to know if there was any truth to the old man's words. Was it really a sign? The road was a mess, branches and leaves scattered everywhere from the storm. But there was something else: ambulances and police cars, lights flashing, parked haphazardly on the side. My stomach dropped. I ran over, ignoring the shouts of the cops trying to hold me back. There, on the road, were bodies. People from the town, ones I'd seen every day, people I knew. They were bruised and bloody, their eyes open but seeing nothing. It looked like they'd been thrown around by a tremendous force. The old man was there too, his whisper now silenced forever. I overheard one of the EMTs, "Never seen anything like it. It's like they were in the middle of something terrible." I knew then that it wasn't some prank or story. It was real. And I had been right in the middle of it. The police questioned me, but what could I say? That people had been standing in the road, that I'd seen a twisted deer and a scorched earth with no fire? They'd lock me up and throw away the key. I went home, the image of the broken bodies seared into my mind. I couldn't reconcile the quiet town I knew with the horror I'd seen. I couldn't understand why or how any of it had happened. But I knew one thing for sure: I was leaving. I packed up my truck with everything I could carry and drove away from Elkhorn Road, away from the memories and the nightmares. I don't know where I'm going, but I can't stay here. Maybe one day I'll understand what happened, but for now, I just drive, the open road my only companion, hoping to outrun the shadows that linger just out of sight. If you enjoyed the spine-chilling journey down Elkhorn Road and want to keep the mystery alive, make sure to hit that like button. It helps more than you know. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss out on any of our dark explorations. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you've got a story of your own, send it our way. You never know, it might just be featured in our next video. Stay safe out there, and remember, some stories become real in the telling. Until next time.